In today's video, going to be touching on a couple of polls that have come out this week. These are state-specific results, which I love going over. So we have the states of Texas and Michigan. If you're interested in looking at all this data for yourself, I'll have links to these polls down in the video description. But we're going to start here with this Quinnipiac University poll looking at the state of Texas. And perhaps the most interesting piece of data here is the fact that Joe Biden is leading Trump in by a little bit more than the margin of error. He has a 4-point lead, 48% to 44%. This is just one data point to go off of, so don't put too much into just one particular poll, but definitely a positive sign for Biden and his candidacy having that 4-point lead over Trump in this particular Texas poll from Quinnipiac. And Quinnipiac University, very reputable polling resource to use. And then we take a look at the other upper tier 2020 Democratic hopefuls, and they're not doing quite as well as Biden, but within the realm of being very competitive. We see the numbers here where Elizabeth Warren is losing by about 1 percentage point, 46 to 45. Trump has a 3-point lead over Sanders, 47 to 44. Trump has a 48% margin to Beto O'Rourke, who's at 45. So a 3-point lead for Trump over Beto O'Rourke. Actually does surprise me a little bit that O'Rourke wouldn't do better than that, especially in a poll where we're seeing that Biden has a 4-point lead. Probably a little bit of a disappointing result there for O'Rourke to see these numbers where he's not even outperforming Elizabeth Warren in the state of Texas in this result. Now we look at the other three results here. We have Trump 46% to Pete Buttigieg, who's at 44%. Trump at 47 to Kamala Harris at 43. And then Trump at 46 to former San Antonio Mayor Julian Castro, who's at 43 percentage points. And going down and taking a look at some of the other potentially interesting numbers here. And it looks like Texas is pretty split in terms of Trump's job approval, 48% to the approval compared to 49% disapproval. And that split is among men and women, where men are positive 12 points to the approval side, while women are negative 13 points to the disapproval. And continuing to look at some other numbers from this particular survey that was taken, the Democratic primary has Joe Biden leading the way with 30% support. And then the other Democrats that crack that 15% threshold to get part of that pledged delegation split are Beto O'Rourke, who comes in at 16% support. And that's also probably a pretty disappointing number there for O'Rourke, that he's not a bit more competitive with Joe Biden in his state of Texas. Bernie Sanders at 15% support, so just cracking that number needed. You need to get at least 15% of the vote in the primary to be part of those candidates that get a percentage split of the pledged delegates. And all the other candidates are trailing that number. We have Elizabeth Warren at 11%, and then 4% for Harris, Castro, and 3% for Buttigieg. And then no other Democratic candidate topped at least 2 percentage points. And then just looking at the Senate race, I actually wish that they would have done a head-to-head poll here between Beto O'Rourke if he challenged Cornyn, but they did a few different questions that maybe aren't quite as interesting. But we see that the Texas Democrats and Democratic leaners, 60% want O'Rourke to challenge incumbent U.S. Senator John Cornyn, as opposed to 27% would rather have him continue his campaign for presidency. So there is quite a bit of support here for O'Rourke to run for the Senate and try to challenge John Cornyn. Perhaps that's more of a winnable race for O'Rourke than what he did against Cruz, because we take a look here at the numbers, and Cornyn just isn't as well known in the state of Texas. We see that in his numbers where he has 44% approval compared to Ted Cruz, who's at 50% approval. So the fact that John Cornyn doesn't have quite the same cachet in the state of Texas as Ted Cruz, maybe that makes him more beatable for somebody like Beto O'Rourke. Also in a presidential year, which tends to be a little bit better in general for Democratic candidates. Maybe that's enough to push him over the line, where he came up a couple points short against Ted Cruz. Maybe that's enough to make a difference for his 2020 chances if he were to run against John Cornyn. All right, so now I'm going to move over and take a look at the state of Michigan, have some interesting data to go over. And it's not looking great for President Trump to try to win this state. Of course, he won the state of Michigan in surprise fashion over Hillary Clinton back in 2016 and was a big difference maker in him getting over the line to win the presidency in the Electoral College. Taking a look at the numbers in the head-to-head matchups between those upper-tier Democratic candidates and Trump, we have Biden, who has a 12.1% lead in Michigan. Sanders, the exact same lead, 12.1 percentage points. And we'll get into the numbers a little bit more, where Biden and Sanders support actually differs a little bit. And then some of the other candidates not doing quite as well. Buttigieg, a 5.5-point lead. Warren with a 4.5 point lead, and Kamala Harris with a 3.3 percentage point lead. And this is troubling for Kamala Harris. At this point in the process, still very early on, and she doesn't have the same type of name recognition as some of these other candidates, obviously, particularly ones like Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. But in these state-specific polls, she tends to not do nearly as well as a lot of the other candidates, which is a little bit concerning for her candidacy. All right, so now we're going to go down and take a look at numbers that I find very interesting, and that's with not just independent voters. I'll touch on that first, but then also taking a look at some of the different splits in Biden to Trump and then Sanders to Trump, different percentages there. But just starting with the independents, where Sanders and Biden are both doing very well. Sanders has a 17.5 percentage point lead over Trump, and then Biden also doing quite well at 14.2% lead. You contrast that to these other candidates. Buttigieg only leads by 2%. Warren losing by around 3%, and Harris losing by 8 percentage points among independents. Large gaps there between some of these candidates that aren't doing as well in that head-to-head matchup with Trump in comparison to what Sanders and Biden are currently able to do. All right, now I want to go down and take a look at the education in this particular poll amongst men voters, and it's just fascinating to see this particular result. So we take a look at high school educated voters, and Trump has a 9.6 percentage point lead over Joe Biden amongst these voters. In contrast to when we're taking these voters into account, he's losing by 9.8 percentage points to Bernie Sanders amongst this same sample. That is a massive swing in difference, an 18 percentage point to the positive for Bernie Sanders amongst high school educated men. And that is a very important block of voters for the Democrats to do a little bit better in the state of Michigan in 2016, because that's a block of voters that did not have high regards for Hillary Clinton, and they went for Trump rather in large fashion. And that was a big difference maker in Trump being able to eke himself over the line and get just enough support to go on and win the state of Michigan. So if you have somebody like a Bernie Sanders who's on the top of the ticket and he pulls over a lot of these potential high school educated men voters, that could be a big difference maker in the Democrats going on and reclaiming the state of Michigan. We take a look at college educated voters, and Biden has around a 10 percentage point lead over Donald Trump, in contrast to Bernie Sanders, who only has around a 2 percentage point lead. So we have a big contrast there amongst college educated, high school educated voters. So that's all the data that I wanted to touch on in these particular polls, looking at the states of Texas and Michigan. And again, if you want to look at all of the data for yourself, I'll have links posted down in the video description. Thanks for stopping by. Consider subscribing for more of this type of content in the future, and I hope to see you guys back here for my next video.